travelers to Midnight Atlas.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really plunging into something fascinating, a mystery, really. We're talking about a name that it conjures up images of dark packs, crossroads at midnight, and this absolutely revolutionary sound, Robert Johnson. Yeah, Robert Johnson. A figure whose life was incredibly short, but his impact, huge, indelible, really. And his story is just perfect for you, our listener. So our mission today is to wade through, the biographical stuff, personal accounts, all of it.
Yeah.
We want to distill the most compelling bits, the surprising facts, and really try to get a handle on the true impact of this elusive artist.
It really is striking, isn't it, how one person, whose life is, frankly, barely documented, how he managed to shape entire genres of music, and people are still debating him, arguing about him. I mean, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame straight up called him the first ever rock star. Think about that. His entire recording career lasted, 7 months?
7 months.
Yet he's seen as the master of Delta blues, one of the most influential musicians, period, of the 20th century. It's a case where the facts we do have are almost as wild as the legends.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about those legends, because you can't discuss Robert Johnson without diving straight into the most captivating part, right? The myth. So let's picture it. Young guy, Robert Johnson, down in Hazelhurst, Mississippi. Just a kid, really. He's hanging around the big names, like Son House, trying to learn guitar. But here's the kicker. Everyone, including Son House, said he was, pretty bad, like really bad. Son House famously told this story about Johnson being this little boy who was so terrible on guitar that people in the juke joints would actually tell him to stop playing. Just, kid, please stop. Imagine that, being told you're that awful. And then, poof, he disappears, just vanishes. Could have been 6 months, maybe a year, maybe even longer, like a year and a half. Nobody really knew where he went. And this is where the story just takes off. Because when Robert Johnson came back, the accounts say he was transformed, a completely different musician. He returns with this absolutely jaw-dropping guitar technique, virtuosic, something nobody had heard before. It was complex, rhythmic, technically brilliant. It sounded like he could play multiple parts at once. Bass lines, rhythm, melody, just way beyond what anyone else was doing then. How could someone get that good that fast? It seemed impossible.
Exactly. And that seemingly miraculous transformation, that's what directly fuels the Crossroads legend. It gave it legs. The core story, the one everyone knows, is that he took his guitar down to a crossroads near Dockery Plantation, supposedly, at midnight. And there, this large black man appears, which everyone pretty much took to mean the devil. This figure takes Johnson's guitar, tunes it for him, plays a few songs to show him how it's done, and then hands it back. The deal is struck. Faustian bargain, right? His soul for this incredible talent. And what really sells this, what locks it in, are Johnson's own lyrics. They're so haunting. Think about Me and the Devil Blues. He sings, clear as day, me and the devil was walking side by side, or Crossroad Blues, standing at the crossroad, tried to flag a ride. People hear that and think, yep, that's the deal.
But it gets even more tangled, doesn't it? This whole Crossroads story. It's fascinating because it wasn't even originally his story.
Right.
It was associated with another blues guy first, Tommy Johnson. No relation, confusingly enough.
Tommy Tom.
But somehow the story just sort of migrated over to Robert. Maybe because his talent seemed so otherworldly, it fit better.
Could be. His aura, his mystique.
And there are other variations too. Like Tommy Johnson's brother, Liddell, mentioned learning to play in a graveyard. Which is interesting because that connects to Ike Zimmerman, the guy rumored to have actually taught Robert Johnson.
Right, the Zimmerman connection.
People said Zimmerman learned guitar by playing on tombstones at midnight.
And recent research actually suggests, Johnson and Zimmerman probably did practice in graveyards late at night.
But maybe not for demonic pacts, but just because it's quiet. No one to bother them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Peaceful, isolated, a place to focus.
And trying to pinpoint which crossroads, forget it. It seems like every town on the Delta wants to claim it. You hear Dockery, Hazelhurst, Beauregard, Clarksdale, even Memphis and Rosedale get mentioned.
That's all over the map.
Yeah, it just shows how much his story is constantly shifting. It reflects the reality that Robert Johnson was always moving, a rambling guy, as they said.
And this whole devil thing in the legend, it really kicks off a fascinating debate among scholars. It's not straightforward. Some folks, like the folklorist Harry Hyatt and later Bill Ferris, suggest maybe the devil wasn't just the Christian devil. They floated the idea it could also link back to Legba, the African trickster god.
Yeah.
Legba is associated with crossroads in Vodou and other African diaspora religions. It's a place you go for wisdom, or make a deal, maybe. Bill Ferris put it nicely. You go down to the crossroads to learn, and in his case, to learn in a Faustian pact with the devil. It could be both. But then you have other scholars, like the blues expert David Evans, who strongly disagree. Evans basically says, no, the Legda connection is tenuous. The devil imagery in blues. That's straight up Western folklore, the Christian devil. He also points out that musically, actual African music associated with Legba, with its complex polyrhythms, sounds very different from blues.
Okay, so a real academic back and forth there.
Oh, absolutely. And you had Alan Lomax, the famous folklorist, who sort of broadly claimed all early blues players, fiddlers, and guitarists were seen as children of the devil, just because blues was associated with dancing and sinfulness in general.
Right, the devil's music idea.
Exactly. But then, importantly, black scholars like Amiri Baraka and Cornel West pushed back hard against just seeing it through a Western lens. They argued, look, you can't ignore the African context. Blues is rooted in African traditions. Things like call and response are absolutely central, even if Evans downplayed it.
So it's a complex mix of potential influences, African roots, American folklore, Christian ideas, all swirling around him.
Precisely. It shows how we often try to fit these figures into boxes that might be too simple.
Okay, so amidst all this myth and debate, let's anchor ourselves to something solid. The music itself, the recordings.
Yeah.
Because despite the legends, what we have is this body of work, and it's incredible. What always gets me is just how brief that recording period was. So short, so intense. Just 7 months total, split between 2 sessions. That's it. The first one was November 1936, room 414, Gunter Hotel, San Antonio. Just set up right there in the hotel room.
Amazing, isn't it?
And the second, June 1937, in Dallas. They used a warehouse space, the Videograph building. And from those two sessions, we get everything we have. 29 distinct songs, plus about 13 alternate takes. His entire legacy on record. And wow, what songs. Stuff that became absolute blues cornerstones. I believe I'll Dust My Broom, Sweet Home Chicago, Crossroads Blues, obviously. And his very first release, Terraplane Blues, apparently sold around 10,000 copies, which back then for a blues record was actually pretty successful.
It was significant, yeah. Showed he had immediate appeal, and his musical style was just something else. Keith Richards put it perfectly, didn't he? You want to know how good the blues can get? Well, this is it. But what's really interesting is, while we think of him as the Delta blues guy, people back then respected him for his incredible range. He could do the raw country slide stuff, absolutely, but he could also pull off jazz licks, pop tunes. Apparently he could hear something once and just play it back. You listen to Kind-Hearted Women blues, it sounds more polished, maybe like the blues coming out of Chicago or St. Louis, and then they're red hot, it's pure uptown swing or ragtime. He wasn't just one thing, and the guitar playing itself, technically it was just mind-blowing for the time. So complex, so advanced. That famous Keith Richards quote, again, when he first heard Johnson, he literally asked, who is the other guy playing with him?
Yeah, he thought it was 2 guitars.
Exactly. He couldn't believe one person could do all that. Richards called him an orchestra all by himself. The way he used the guitar, it wasn't just chords and rhythm, it was like another voice, a talking instrument, you know? That's a deep tradition in Afro-American music. The guitar answers the vocal, cries out, tells its own part of the story.
The conversation between voice and guitar.
Precisely. And his voice, Eric Clapton called Johnson's singing the most powerful cry in the human voice.
Oh.
He used microtonality, those notes between the notes on a piano, to convey this incredible raw emotion. It just cuts right through you.
Wow.
Bob Dylan was struck by how utterly fluid his songs were and talked about his code of language, like there were layers of meaning in the lyrics. And Bill Ferris, we mentioned him earlier, even compared Johnson's lyrics, which were often intensely sexual, using all these metaphors. Ferris compared him to British romantic poets like Keats or Shelley, high praise.
Yeah, and it's clear he wasn't creating in isolation. He soaked everything up like a sponge, right?
Yeah.
Fusing all these different influences. You can really hear it. Like, the raw power of Son House definitely comes through in something like Ramblin' on My Mind.
Oh, for sure.
And that eerie, haunting quality of Skip James. You feel that in Come On In My Kitchen.
Infinitely.
For Love in Vain, apparently he took the structure from Leroy Carr, but used lyrics borrowed from Blind Lemon Jefferson.
He was a master synthesizer.
Totally. And Milk Cow's Calf Blues was a direct nod to Kokomo Arnold. Plus, you hear Lonnie Johnson's smoother, maybe jazzier influence in songs like Malted Milk. He just took all these threads and wove them into this fabric that was completely, uniquely Robert Johnson.
And if you connect those innovations to the bigger picture, his legacy is just immense. That boogie bass pattern, the boogie shuffle he played on guitar. Johnny Temple, another bluesman, specifically said he learned it from Johnson. And that riff became arguably one of the most important riffs in blues music, full stop.
Wow, okay.
You can trace it directly. Elmore James took Dust My Broom and made it his signature song, slide riff and all. Jimmy Reed, later in Chicago, used a very similar driving shuffle rhythm, the trademark Reed shuffle. You hear echoes of Johnson.
So his influence spread through the blues world pretty quickly.
Massively. But it didn't stop there. Think rock and roll. Chuck Berry took that same boogie pattern Johnson used and adapted it for electric guitar anthems like Roll Over Beethoven and Johnny Be Good. It's right there.
The DNA is there.
Absolutely. Mark Myers, a music writer, said Johnson's Stop Breaking Down Blues from '37 sounded so far ahead of its time, it could easily have been a rock demo cut in 1954. That's why the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inducted him right away in '86, their first ceremony, as an early influence. They knew he was foundational. And the list of legends who explicitly cited him is just staggering. Eric Clapton called him the most important blues musician who ever lived. Even did a whole tribute album, Me and Mr. Johnson.
Right, I remember that album.
Bob Dylan borrowed song structures, lyrical ideas, that code of language he talked about. Said Johnson was like nothing else he'd ever heard. Robert Plant. Said Led Zeppelin owe more or less our existence to guys like Johnson.
That's huge.
Keith Richards, obsessed with his guitar playing, found the themes compelling. Johnny Winter thought it was pure genius, and the formal recognition kept coming. Blues Hall of Fame, a Grammy for the Complete Recordings box set decades later, a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. He even got a U.S. postage stamp. He became an American icon.
Which brings us, inevitably, to the end of the story. And just like the beginning, it's tragic and shrouded in mystery. Robert Johnson died on August 16th, 1938. He was only 27 years old, near Greenwood, Mississippi.
Year?
Which makes him, grimly, one of the very first members of what people later called the 27 Club, all those musicians who died at that same young age.
Joplin, Hendrix, Morrison, Cobain, Winehouse, he was one of the originals.
And the circumstances are just as murky as everything else. His death certificate. It wasn't even found until almost 30 years later. And when they found it, the cause of death was listed simply as no doctor. Basically unknown causes. No autopsy was ever done. The story that gets told most often, the most popular theory, is the poisoning one. That he was playing at a juke joint, maybe flirting with a married woman, and her jealous husband slipped poison into his whiskey.
Right, that's the prevailing narrative.
David Honeyboy Edwards, who knew Johnson and was supposedly there, even told a story about seeing Johnson get handed an open bottle of whiskey. Edwards said he knocked it out of Johnson's hand, warning him. But Johnson, maybe defiantly, took another poisoned bottle offered to him later.
A fatal mistake, if true.
Yeah. Story goes he started feeling sick that night, got incredibly ill over the next few days, severe pain, and then died.
But it's still just a theory, right?
Exactly. Other possibilities have been suggested. Congenital syphilis has been mentioned.
Yeah.
One theory involved naphthalene poisoning from mothballs dissolved in something, maybe aggravating existing ulcers and causing internal bleeding.
Yikes.
Another, more recent medical theory suggests maybe Marfan syndrome, a connective tissue disorder, which could have led to something sudden, like an aortic dissection.
So basically, we just don't know for sure.
We don't. The uncertainty is part of the whole package, and it extends even to where he's buried, his actual gravesite. Still unknown. There are 3 different markers put up at 3 different possible locations in Mississippi. Nobody knows which one, if any, is the right spot.
And this really highlights what researchers call the problems of biography when studying someone like Robert Johnson. It is incredibly hard to piece together his life story with any certainty. You've got so few official records. The eyewitness accounts often contradicted each other, or memories get fuzzy over time. Plus, the man himself was elusive. He apparently used at least 8 different last names while traveling and working. Made him hard to track.
8 surnames. Wow.
Yeah. Even nailing down his birth date was tricky. There were conflicting dates on marriage certificates, census records. Eventually, scholars kind of settled on May 8, 1911 as the most likely, but even that took work. And it comes back to that question, doesn't it? How much of the Robert Johnson we think we know is the actual man? And how much is shaped by the legend, by the gaps, even down to what he looked like?
The photographs, yeah, that's a whole other saga.
For decades, people thought there were no photos of him. 0. Which just added to the mystique. Then finally, 2 surfaced, found with his half-sister, Carrie Thompson. There's the famous one from the dime store photo booth, looking sharp in a suit, and the studio portrait where he's holding the guitar.
Those are the ones everyone recognizes.
Right. Then, much more recently, in 2020, a third photo emerged. He's smiling in this one. And experts generally accept it as authentic now, but there have been others floated over the years that are highly disputed.
I think I've seen some of those online.
Yeah, there's one supposedly showing him with fellow bluesman Johnny Shines, another with some women and musician Robert Lockwood Jr., but experts mostly dismiss them. They point to problems with the clothing styles, the furniture, facial recognition analysis doesn't quite match up, potential anachronisms.
So even the visual record is contested.
It absolutely is. It's another reminder of how careful you have to be sifting fact from fiction or just wishful thinking when the concrete evidence is so thin.
It's kind of ironic, though, isn't it? For a life filled with so much uncertainty, so many intangible elements, his legacy eventually did lead to something very tangible, very concrete. The legal battle over his estate.
Ah, yes, the royalties.
Yeah, because he died without a will, obviously. Years later, this whole fight started over who should inherit the rights to his music, the royalties that were starting to pile up.
It took a long time to resolve.
It did. But finally, in 1998, the courts ruled. They determined that a man named Claude Johnson, who was born out of wedlock but proven to be Robert's son, that Claude was his sole heir. And he ended up receiving over $1 million in back royalties and future rights.
Wow.
So in the end, there was this very real financial legacy passed down from a man whose life often felt more like smoke and rumor. So wrapping this all up, what does it all mean for us now? When we think about Robert Johnson, he really does seem to exist in two forms, doesn't he? There's the actual musician, the person who lived and breathed and played, walked those dusty Delta roads. And then there's the icon, the powerful, almost supernatural figure who embodies the mystery and the soul of the blues. His short life, those few recordings. It just seems impossible they could have had such a colossal, lasting impact. But they did. It echoes through everything. It's just a staggering testament to artistic genius, really.
It really is. And even with all the research, all the books, all the documentaries, the core mystery of Robert Johnson still holds. It endures. His story isn't just about the music, incredible as it is. It's also about, well, the power of stories themselves, how legends get built, how they get sustained, especially when you have those gaps in the historical record. Those gaps become fertile ground for our imagination, our fascination. And maybe here's a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. In our world today, we're drowning in information, right? We can look up almost anything instantly. Data everywhere. So why do we still find ourselves clinging so tightly to the unprovable stuff? To the whispered tales, the ambiguities, the sheer enigma around someone like Robert Johnson? What does that fascination tell you about our own human need for myth, maybe? Our need for mystery, even? When we try to comprehend real genius.
You have been listening to Midnight Atlas. For more journeys into the unknown, be sure to follow or subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Until our next journey, stay curious.
Atlas.